Okay, so I am going to go ahead. This is going to probably be a bit lengthier than what other videos could be, but maybe across a couple of sessions, I'm going to record just how to set up and build a ZUI inside of CloudBolt. I'm going to be starting this from scratch, so there might be some bumbles, some faults, and we'll kind of take this as we go. The hope is that this would get edited later and that we can share this out with customers. But effectively, what I'm going to build is a ZUI that will allow us to export content from CloudBolt to a Git repo. This is going to be, we're going to start building this out for our pre-sales environment so that we can develop content for CloudBolt in one instance. We can then sync it to a GitHub repo. We would target a specific branch. We'll have a specific kind of outlay for what the directory structure should look like in there. Full disclosure, I have not planned a ton of this. This is just kind of, I have an idea, I'm going to code and go. Hopefully some people can get some use out of this. So anyway, we're going to start. One of the handy things when you're working with UI extensions in CloudBolt, you can go over and we give you this. I have a whole bunch of ones that I've worked with in here. But one of the handy things that we have here is this ability to create a package. And we'll talk through some of the options here. So the label for this, now that's kind of funny. It just auto-filled in GitHub. I'm not going to call it CB GitHub. I'm just going to call it, because it might not be just GitHub. I mean, I think at some point in time, we may expand this to include other Git-based repositories or other types of, maybe Azure DevOps or GitLab or Bitbucket, some of the other popular source control mechanisms, Jenkins maybe. Not Jenkins, but yeah, you get the idea. Anyway, so we're going to create this. I don't want to call it like GitHub sync, but maybe what we call this is something along the lines of Git management. I think that kind of makes sense. We'll give it a description here in just a second as well, but I'm just going to call it Git management. And then as a description, when we're descriptive with this, this allows as we export content, it'll give you some labels on the content that you have in here. So we want to try and get this right up front, describe what we're doing. That way we have an idea of the goal that we're working towards. So as a description here, I'm going to say this is a CloudBolt GUI that enables the management of CloudBolt content via Git. Spell things correctly. We can expand on this as time goes. I think there's going to be quite a bit more functionality. Maybe in time we'll add a README or documentation to this as well. But just at face value, pretty straightforward. Here's where this starts to become important. So labels. We could label this and include some labels here. I haven't actually used this from this screen before. So labels are kind of like tags inside of CloudBolt. So if you wanted to categorize and organize things inside the CloudBolt system, you could add a label here. I'm not going to do that at this point in time. But I am going to go over to extension management, extension type. I have a couple of different options here. So admin page, I know, is the one that I'm going to select, at least to start. I've had some other ideas where maybe this functionality could also be expanded to do things like maybe a detail view tab, or maybe there's an additional tab that shows up on blueprints that just says sync this blueprint with my source control repository, things like that. But for now, I think I'm going to handle most of that inside of the admin page. One of the handy things with the ZUI is that once you create a piece of content here that you're going to use, you can share it with other things inside of CloudBolt. So I'm going to start by creating an admin page. And one of the handy things that this is going to do is it's going to create the file structure on the CloudBolt operating system that is required to work with the ZUI. From here on out, though, we're going to start getting into a lot more code-based elements and things along those lines. So I'm going to remember this Git management. My instance of CloudBolt is I have a lot of code in there. So if I try and do synchronizations, it just takes a long time. So I'm going to pre-create this folder in a second. You'll see what I'm doing. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to create this ZUI. This creates a skeleton, again, on our CloudBolt system. Now I also have, and I prefer to develop with PyCharm. It just does a really good job with Python editing and helping to code complete some things. I'll also point out just one of the things, I do not have Copilot signed in right now, but one of the things that I would highly recommend is also taking a look at this if your organization supports it and allows it within their boundaries, because you'll see as we get into this, this is extremely powerful to help you get in and code things, even in CloudBolt. It doesn't necessarily understand CloudBolt's mechanisms, things like that, but you'll see as we get, so we're now logged into Copilot, but as we get going, it's going to write a lot of the things like documentation and things like that for me. If we're descriptive when we're creating methods, it will attempt to fill out those methods and at least give me a framework. It's not 100% accurate. It gets better with every release, but it's extremely powerful. Now you'll notice here, we don't have a Git management folder here yet, but basically what PyCharm does and the way that I have it configured here is I have a local folder on my computer that I'm developing against. And then this local folder, any changes I make in PyCharm, as soon as I save those files, it actually syncs via SSH to copy those files over to my CloudBolt instance. And the directory that it copies it over to is var opt CloudBolt ProServe. So this folder is mapped to my ProServe directory inside of CloudBolt, which is a special purpose directory that allows us to store things on CloudBolt that persist beyond upgrades. So, I usually do most of my development in PyCharm, and then I'll import it into the blueprints. This is just a lot more of an impactful way to do things. But I store a lot of my just ad hoc actions that I write right under the root of ProServe. But we also have this special directory that's called XUI. This XUI directory is extremely powerful because what we're doing is we'll parse this directory when we restart Apache and CloudBolt to find new XUIs inside of the system. Again, notice I don't have that folder that I just created here yet, but I'm going to create a directory. I'm then going to I want to sync this from deployed. So I'm going to sync with deployed, just see what files are out there. It's reaching out to my system via SSH, and I'm just going to sync all of those over, and we'll take a look and see what that looks like now. So now I have a couple, again, this is just a skeleton, but it started things off for me where I didn't really have anything. I now have some things. I have my admin page, which is at this point just a blank HTML document. I also have a init file that tells it that this Git management is a Python module. So because it's a Python module in my XUI directory, CloudBolt knows that we want to load that into the Python environment as things come up. So, and it's blank. That's typically a blank file. We might do some things with that later. Admin page, we're going to fill in a template for those things. I'm actually going to cheat a little bit and take some content from one of the examples that I've worked with recently, just because I don't like repeating myself. So you can also do that with CloudBolt by going to the content library and downloading any of these things that might be in the content library, like the CloudFormation and the ARM templates. XUI is available out there. Those are good examples of what a CloudBolt XUI might look like. But then you can go in and leverage some of the files. Like if I were to look at my templates, I can look at my admin page here, and maybe I just take the admin page from here, and I'm probably going to do that now that we're here. And I'm going to come over, and I'm now I have an admin page. It's not completely right. I need to change a lot of the content in here, like ARM template library doesn't make sense because we're now working with Git management. But it gives me a framework and something that I can work within. So you'll see how we start to build on this as we get a little further down the line. So, okay, so we've started with our admin page, and maybe what we can start with, I'm not entirely sure everything that I'm going to do yet. But maybe I'm not going to start with my HTML. This will come back to this here in a little bit. Other thing that I'm going to need, so let's actually start on the views file. Very basic views file. So when you're working with a Django, effectively, I believe this is a Django application, but when you work with a Django application, you get there's a couple of like well-known files for writing Django apps. One is this views.py, and this views.py file, what it does is it tells us most of the things that we do to call this template and to pass information into this template. It's called a context. to render the template, because at the end of the day, this is not an actual HTML page. It's doing things like pulling in well-established things from CloudBolt, like these helper tags, and static would pull in all of our static files. So anything that's icon related, things like that, those are going to be pulled in as part of that. The other thing that I'm going to do here, because I usually forget to do this, is in my init file, one of the things that we do in a XUI, when I go to export this file later, I need to tell the CloudBolt system what file extensions I'm going to recognize as part of an export. So I'm going to do that real quick before I get too much further into this. And again, yep, it's in the init.py file. So I'm going to just copy that from my ARM templates and paste it here. So .py, obviously we need our Python files, we need our HTML files. There's a couple of other things that we might want to include as well. I'll just leave these here for now. I don't have any, so it doesn't really matter, but this allows us to pick and choose from this XUI directory which files we may want to include as part of an export and which ones we might not to. Maybe you have something that pertains to the local environment, like you're creating JSON files in here that store some configuration about that local environment. You might not want to export that with the XUI. So in that case, you may want to leave those JSONs off of here. But this allowed XUI extensions is something, this is in our documentation. This is how a XUI would not export something. Okay, so back over to our views file. This is pretty basic so far. It's called functions here. We're not really going to do anything with that yet, because the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this URLs file, because one of the things that we'll do in CloudBolt is allow you to specify different short URL patterns for things that we're trying to do in CloudBolt. So again, we will need this URLs file eventually. I'm just going to leave it named as url.py. I'll work with the Git stuff later. I'm not super worried about that right now. I'm going to close the ARM templates ones, because if not, I'll start editing those. And then what I can do is I'm just going to shorten this up. And I'm going to say, having one for my admin page here. These are all just, I don't know that I need a ton of these. You know what, I might keep an admin page. So I'm going to leave the create, edit, and delete connection info. I may need to leverage those so that we can set up connections to our Git endpoint. So I'm going to leave those there. We definitely don't need sync ARM blueprint or delete ARM blueprint or edit ARM blueprint or create ARM blueprint. So I'm going to get rid of those. I know that we don't need those. And I'm going to, real quick while I'm in here, I can do a find and replace. So find and replace, I'm going to look for ARM _ templates, and I'm going to replace all of the instances of that with Git _ management, because that's what we're doing. So I'm going to go ahead. That's strange. It doesn't find ARM templates at all. Don't want to search in selection. I just want to search in the document. So XUI.ARM templates, import views. We're going to kind of wipe all of this in one fell swoop and replace all. Okay, so now we have XUI.get management. So we're doing our imports from our appropriate views file. And then we're just updating things for our connection info URLs when we create those. Actually, for right now, I'm just going to comment this portion out. We will need this later, but this way it will complain about this on import when we reboot if the URL patterns don't have this views.create connection info method or inside of the views file yet. So just going to comment that. We'll come back to that later. Okay, so if we jump over to our views file, and again, I am a huge fan of reusing work that I've done in the past. Actually, one last thing I'm going to do before I get into any of that. I'm going to create one more file here, and I'm going to call this, we could put, I like to, a lot of times I like to keep the functionality that I'm using to connect to systems in a separate file. I might call that something like shared or utilities. So I think maybe in this case, get management dot utilities would make sense. So I'm going to create a utilities.py file, and I'm going to use this file to store any of the methods that I'm using to connect to maybe our Git systems, and that would allow me to start off and just connect to maybe GitHub. But then I can take that and add some additional functionality to it to, at some point, target other Git source control mechanisms. So I'm going to call it utilities.py. We now have, I'm not going to add it to Git, we'll get there eventually. But now we have an additional file. And again, this is just a placeholder for now. I'm going to add a lot more content in there as time goes on. Okay, so back over to our views file. And again, I'm going to cheat a little bit here. I'm going to go back over to the views file just to get a look of, I don't remember exactly how we did this. But I do know that I'm looking, because I want to create an admin extension. So I just want to take a look at that ARM templates XUI to see what we did there. There's a decorator here called @admin extension that tells me that that's an admin extension. You'll see that there's only one in this entire file. So the top portion, the title allows me to specify the actual title that the end user will see for the extension. I think right now, if we go to Git management, yeah, see the label on the page itself is not going to look super user friendly. See if it even does anything. We go back to our admin page. All of our admin XUI show under this admin extensions. Yeah, see, so git _ management _ admin 0. That's not what I want it to look like. And nothing's working yet because I've broken it all. So we'll come back to that. Okay, so I'm going to start by just titling what my admin page should be called. And I'm going to title it Git Management XUI. And then I'm actually going to not retype what I'd already written, but I'm going to go back over to my XUI inside of CloudBolt, and I don't know where my description went. It went somewhere. I just don't know offhand. So I'm just going to make something else up here real quick. So Git Management XUI. This XUI allows you to export content from CloudBolt to a Git repo. Okay, so I'm going to knock that down a line just to keep this with within an 80-line PEP8 standard. Better if we do this. It drives me crazy that that's over here, so I may just do this. Actually, there we go. Should do it. I imagine it splits lines like that. We'll see. It might complain about it as well. Actually, you know what? It's within these parentheses, so it's going to read this as one line. So we should be good there. We'll find out. It might complain about it too. I also don't want this to be just called function 0. That's really generic. So I'm going to call this maybe Git Manager. And this view is how I'm going to construct my page that we're going to show back to users. So one of the things that you'll see here, they're basically this library function doing a couple of things. We're building our context. Context includes, yeah, so you can see that the context, we're passing our context into this admin context. So the context defines the connection infos, and we're going to use that for ARM templates. We use that to show the connection infos. I'm going to use a lot of this with, I probably reuse quite a bit of this just because it's something I've already written, something that I'm familiar with. So we do need Git connection infos. We're probably also going to want, maybe not ARM blueprints, but we do need blueprints. Maybe documentation's good as well, where we can have a doc string display on our page. So we're going to, and then I have a couple of ideas for other things here. So why don't we start with context? And then what we can do is we can write our context here, and then we can back into these methods. Notice our underscore underlined red because we don't have methods that match those today. So we'll go through and build those out. I'm going to actually rename this to ARM connection infos, but I do want connection infos. Leave a little space for that method. Knock this down a couple of lines. And then notice you can already see GitHub Copilot. is giving me some recommendations based on things that I haven't filled in yet. So I'm just going to press tab and let Copilot kind of get doing its job. So I'm going to pause for just a minute. I'll be back. Okay, so we're back. We're going to go ahead and figure out how to get connection infos. Again, I've done a lot of that already, so. Go ahead and use this here. Now notice there's a couple of other methods that didn't come with this. I don't know that I want to do it exactly this way, so I might pull some of the code out of that method. And you'll notice here, it's being pulled in from shared. So I'm using the shared method in my ARM template. So just hunting down. This is something that I did for this one because there were multiple types of connection info types. So I may leverage this again because this is really handy when we have multiple different types of connection info. We can use those labels. So we create a connection info, which is just the means for connecting to some other system in CloudBolt. When we create a connection info, we can label it, and then based off of the label, we can determine what endpoint we're going to connect to. So this is really similar to our existing use case. I've actually done a lot of Git work with the ARM templates and CloudFormation templates, so we may end up reusing a lot of this. So I'm going to get supported connection info labels, and I'm actually going to paste that into my, and I hate reusing code, but because these are meant to be kind of standalone entities, this Python module, I need to tell it what connection info labels are supported with this Git management capability. So I'm going to go into my utilities file and do get supported connection info labels. So we're going to get a tuple of connection info types, label queries, connection info queries, those kinds of things. So this actually returns a tuple of 3 values. The connection info queries is actually just takes in each of the types defined here and builds out the queries that we need to pull back in objects that match this label name. So I'm not going to get super deep into that. But anyway, it's going to return those as I believe an array. Actually, it's going to join them all together because it's one single string of those. So this will be used in a couple of different contexts. And the handy thing is we can edit this once, and that impacts anything else that we're doing in here. So I'm just going to reduce this back to GitHub for now because that's all I'm going to build support for to start. Let's go ahead and save all here. I'm then going to go back over to my Git management views file, and I'm going to get supported connection info labels. Let's see if it understands it yet. Yeah, so you can see here, now that I've added that get supported connection info labels to the utilities folder, it sees the method in PyCharm and allows me to import that. That right click just very simply adds that import at the top for me. So it takes some of the thinking out of there that I would normally do on my own. The other piece we haven't done yet is import the connection infos model here. So I need to go through and import this name. This is the CloudBolt connection info model. So we now have a list of connection infos here. We're then going to create an array. We don't want to include the CloudBolt content library in there. I don't know why I did that. I don't know that we need to do that. Actually, we don't, because we're going to filter on the list of supported types. So I'm going to get rid of this altogether because this should really be all that we need to do. So shorten that up quite a bit. But I'm also going to test. So here's where we start getting into the testing capabilities inside of the CloudBolt system itself. I'm going to start by SSHing to my development instance. Now that I'm in there, I'm going to, actually I have a shortcut that launches what CloudBolt calls Shell Plus. I'm going to type this out so you see what it is, but it's stopped. CloudBolt serve, and then nope, not CloudBolt manage.py and shell_plus. That's going to launch me into an interactive database browser, which is under the covers is Django. It uses IPython, allows you to connect to the database, pull in these connection infos. Now, one of the handy things that we've done here is this get supported connection info labels, because it lives in the XUI folder. Every time we reload this, so if I change a module in here and then I close out of Shell Plus and reload it, it actually loads that into Shell Plus so I can test with the things that I just did. So I'm going to go ahead and first of all run the import in here because it doesn't get imported just because. And then what I can do is I can actually do this and I can see if I'm getting results. So let's see. Let's try. Well, underscore is not going to count because those are just kind of empties. I don't really need them. But let's see if I get queries. There we go. So labels name is GitHub. And that's exactly what we're looking for because that's the query we're going to need to pump into the connection infos for this. And I do have some GitHub connection infos already, which is really handy because we can define a connection info for GitHub once, and we can reuse that for different systems. So let's see what we're getting. So CIs. We went ahead and printed them. We can see that there are 2 here. So here's our query set. We get raw GitHub user content or fake, and then CB GitHub. So those 2 GitHub connection endpoints. So yeah, and the GitHub connection info, this is really just used. We'll have to store a token in the connection info for connecting to GitHub because it needs to have an authorized user who's capable of writing to that repository. So you'll need to make sure that your permissions are set up appropriately to write to the repository. But now if I back up just a little bit, I don't think I've changed anything, but I'm going to relaunch Shell Plus. Again, I have an alias set in my environment just to make it a little easier. But I'm going to come back and just try this method itself. And I like to walk through these methods as I write them, just that way I know that they're working. And then as I put them together, at least I know that most of the sub methods are working. So I'm going to do from XUI management. I'm going to my views file now. Import get connection infos. And then I'm just going to do get connection infos, make sure that it works. Nope, I need to open close parens. So Q is not defined. So that's one of the things that we'll run into here. We actually had to have an import for Q at the top here. I think I'm going to shift get connection infos over to shared because I might use that in different contexts. I don't know that I want to keep it in this views file. I like to keep my views file clean. So I'm going to go over to the utilities folder again, utilities file. I'm going to paste that here. I'm going to re-import connection info. What happened? I think it moved it. Okay, so we've imported connection info. I can actually remove it from my management view now because I'm no longer using this here. I'm actually not calling the get supported connection info labels anymore either, but I am going to be calling my get connection infos from this file. So I can just swap this out real quick. I could also, eventually I would let PyCharm translate that and just redo the imports. But anyway, so get connection infos. The last piece that I need, and I'm going to need it from my views file, is the Q imports. So from Django models, we need to import Q. And this is kind of a funky way of doing it, since we're building a string and then evaluating that string, it doesn't tell us that it needs Q, but based on the error that we just saw, we know that it does. We don't really necessarily need predicted error at this point, so I'm just going to import Q. We're going to ignore that because we know that we need it. We just, even though it's not highlighted, we know that we're leveraging it just in a weird workaround fashion. Anyway. Launching Shell Plus again. Okay, back into Shell Plus. I'm going to hit the up arrow, and instead of view, we want to run on utilities. And then get connection infos, open click friends, nothing. Which tells me something didn't work. And that's why we test these. Oh, there we go. Connection info is just an empty array. So we're going to return CIs, connection infos, and test one last time. Reload shell plus. Get connection infos. There we go. We have both of them. They've both been captured now. So we now have our connection infos. We're going to continue to build out the context because I kind of have an idea of what I need to capture. So first thing I'm going to do is get all of those into my context, and then I'm going to start working on how to represent those back to the customer. So get connection infos. Next thing I'm going to need is, let's just say blueprints. I don't, not ARM blueprints or Git blueprints or anything like that. Part of what I want to do, maybe I just start building this out as I'm thinking through this. I want to enable the capability to export blueprints. You know what? Why don't we start with blueprints? We can add additional use cases as we go. But so let's do get all blueprints. This is going to be a function that allows us to pass some information in about blueprints in CloudBolt. Connection infos, we're gonna use this. This actually gives us a connection info object in our context. So when we get to the template, we're going to be pulling information, data from each of those connection infos to display it back to the user so they can edit it, manage it, those kinds of things. Blueprints, though, what I'm going to do with blueprints is because I want one of the primary use cases for exports for Git would be exporting a blueprint, right? I have a blueprint. I want to export. I want to choose from a list of blueprints to say, these blueprints I want to export to Git. So what we'll do is probably show a list of blueprints. That list has a little bit of information about each blueprint. Maybe we don't pull everything, or maybe we do. I haven't gotten there yet, so we'll figure that out as we go. So get all blueprints. Again, I like to use utilities because if I need to reuse them somewhere else, I'm not referencing the views file. I don't know if that's good, bad, and different, but we're going to do get all blueprints. I don't need to pass, so GitHub doesn't know what I'm trying to do yet. I'm actually going to do, I know what this is. So service blueprint, and again, a shell plus, I just know what this is from experience, but I can go through and do like service blueprint objects, not all. And this would give me all objects inside of CloudBolt. I do know that we don't want like the default custom server blueprint. So maybe what I'll do is, I think there's an exclude, so I'm going to tab that. Yeah, so there's an exclude. And I'm going to exclude anything with name equals. I'm sorry. Because that's not typically one that we would want to export, but let's see. So let's see, we're going to do dot name. Let's find out how many are there. 336 versus, you did all, should be 337. There we go, 337. So we excluded that one blueprint based off of the name. You could do other things. Maybe we don't want to allow them to choose blueprints based off of certain labels, things along those lines. But now I've validated that I'm able to get all of my service blueprints. Again, I don't know about it in my Python module yet, but I can go through and do import service catalog that models and service blueprint. So I'm importing that model. I now know about that model. The other thing, and I think that I don't know that as a customer you would have access to this, but because I'm able to reference source code, it knows about all of these imports. One of the best ways for a customer to find this information is via the models browser. So if you go into all admin, your CloudBolt instance and go to all admin /doc/models, what you could do is you could go through and look for blueprint, see where, here's your different options for different types of blueprints. So there's my service blueprint. So I see that service blueprint falls under service catalog. I think if we go in here, yeah, there you go. So I could do import from service catalog, import service blueprint. I think that's what we did. Service catalog.models, import service blueprint. So, yeah, so it should get you most of the way there. The other way to know for sure, a lot of times, if I want to see the exact import, I'll actually just do a search in my window here. I'll look for service blueprint or the object that I'm working with, and I'll go up to the first one, and we can see here that service blueprint was imported from service catalog.models. So a couple of different ways to get to it. Get back to the bottom here. Okay, so we have our service blueprint here. Service blueprint.objects.exclude, custom server. We don't care about custom server. I'm just wondering if we want to return them or not. I actually want to save this. So blueprints equals. Actually, you know what we could do is just return, keep that short and sweet. That's all we need is service blueprints, and we'll use those directly in the context. As we build out tables for this, we'll reference information from those blueprints. So again, I'm going to go ahead and import from my utilities file, and we can see get management utilities. Now we have get all blueprints included there, imports up top. Next thing I'm going to do, get documentation. This is going to be real basic for now. I might build this out as I go, but you know, if we build out that get documentation, I'm just going to go ahead and make this a commented file. Return. And that would allow me to return that string get management utility. So that's just a start. But again, if we save, exit, I just want to make sure that this works because it's painful to have to keep coming back to this. But we didn't test get all blueprints either. So go back to our from utilities. We're going to get all blueprints, and we're also going to import get documentation. So we've imported both of those. Something about that. No, come on. Get blueprints. There we go. We're seeing our blueprints. 336, which is exactly what we're expecting, and then get documentation. Close. There we go. And that's what we're getting returned. So there's our documentation. So actually for this, what's interesting is that once we start a comment block in Python, about the only time this will allow you to do it without complaining about it. We can actually back that up. And that would back us up to the beginning without putting 4 spaces in front of this. And then we can just write documentation. Yeah, there you go. GitHub Copilot is kind of filling this out as we go. So, and this is, since it's got the new line characters and all of those things, it's going to be formatted in a way that we could use right in an HTML body when we build out this template. Imports, documentation. There we go. So we have our new line between the two. That's a good start. So, okay. We have documentation, we have blueprints, we have get connection infos. We can start to build this as we go. So a lot of times I'm bouncing between my context builders and my templates as I build these things out. But we're going to leave this as a good framework to start with. Let's go ahead and go back to, we need to import get documentation. There we go, ARM templates, or not ARM templates, but get management utilities. We've got one ARM templates. I need to choose the right one. I did select it. Let's see. Get documentation from XUI. There we go. That's the correct one. So got to watch out when you start using multiple modules. It might be using similar or the same functions or modules. Just got to be careful with that. So, okay, let's go back into next thing we're going to do. We have our context. We're not using context for anything yet. So I'm going to go back to my ARM template views. I'm going to search for my admin extension. I don't remember what it was called, and head back over there. Next thing we're doing is this admin context. And then we're doing a return where we render our template, things along those lines. I'm going to just copy all of this because this is the method that we're using to return that admin page to start. So there's a couple of things going on here. I'll try to explain them as I go through. So admin context is building out information that we need to build out our templates. So I'm actually going to go through, I don't want ARM templates anymore, right? We're now in Git _ management. Templates, and then it's not admin.html, it's admin _ page, which is okay. Downline to keep lined up. Notice we're feeding admin context here into the rendering of the page, and what this render will do is to look at this admin page and it'll spin up those web pages as a result. The other part that I'll point out here is this admin context. This tab group is a special type. I believe it's from Django. Nope, I didn't even do that. Tabs.views import tab group. That might be a CloudBolt functionality. Let's go look at, where's my tab group imports here? There we go. Tabs.views import tab group. So I know I have the right one. Tab groups, and this may be on our documentation. I believe it's in our documentation, not 100%. The other thing we need is this underscore. We imported something as an underscore globally for this. So I'm going to find that. Yeah, the you get text Django translation as underscore. So I'm going to import that. Not in utilities. I want that in my views file. Okay, so we have the underscore now. It's not complaining about that anymore. So we're getting a start. The next thing, though, that we're doing here is our template directory. We're going to swap this out. So get _ management templates. We're passing the context that we built here. This is just a dictionary entry of different things we're trying to get to that we will use as we build these pages. And then the request. The request is something that's fed into the method itself. So when you load this XUI, it knows that it's an admin extension because of our decorator, and it's going to pass in information about this request that we then use as part of rendering the template. The request has things like, I believe there's like contextual information. We go over to admin page. I think there's like CSRF tokens and things like that that get passed with the request that tell us about the user that's using this. We might get into that some down the road. I don't see it offhand, but we'll get there. So the next thing we're going to go take a look at is this tabs capability. So this tabs group is an array of tabs. So this is all additional these are comments that had to do with something else where I pulled this code from initially. I'm actually going to get rid of that for now. We might fill that in with additional information. Source control might be a good thing to do, but yeah, we'll get there. I think we do want to call this source control, right? Or we want to call this git repo. We also need to figure out how to store the repo and branch information for our connection as well. So we'll figure that out here in just a second. Okay. So blueprints, again, we want to show them a list of blueprints. We want to show them a list of source control. This would be, and I kind of want to put this at the bottom. Actually, documentation, could do a documentation tab. I don't really care about showing docs yet, so we're going to remove that altogether. Right now, I just care about a blueprints tab and a source control tab. Notice here, that this is referencing something called blueprints or source control. This is the label for the tab. And this is how we get to the HTML doc for each tab. So we go back over to our templates for our ARM templates, we'll see there's a tab blueprints and a tab source control element here. So I'm going to reuse some of this. Let's go ahead and paste there. Care about Git because I'm doing that in other fashion. But effectively, what this does now, if we're building tabs out, we tell it that we want to build a tab called blueprints. Notice there's a specific format here. It's tab hyphen, then the name of the tab, and then it's a .html extension. So it's going to know to launch that tab based off of what was told here. So let's go to tab blueprints. We're going to start here. So there's some HTML code in here. There's a lot of things going on with this. Why don't we, the blueprints that are coming in for ARM templates are going to be quite a bit more like, this is a URL that we're pulling in called create ARM blueprint. We're not going to do any of that. So actually, why don't we save all. One of the things we do need to do for the views, the HTML tabs will render in my CloudBolt instance as soon as the changes are made because they're HTML files. However, these Python files only get updated if we restart Apache. So I'm going to do a quick restart of Apache here. I'm going to pull up my CloudBolt instance. I'm going to refresh, wait for it to come back. Just takes a couple of seconds. I'm doing that, just check things out. Okay, things are back now. So we're going to go ahead and go over to admin, all admin. We're going to jump over to our admin extensions again. Rename it to Git Management XUI. Notice our label changed now that we updated that. Maybe we don't need to call it Git Management XUI. Maybe we just call it Git Management. I'm going to change that real quick before I forget. So that was under our views. Just go to the XUI. It's up a little bit. Okay, so we have that done. Our XUI now. Let's see if our page is loading. There's a good chance it's not yet. Actually, I lied. Hey, look at that. So we have our tabs, right? This is based off of information that's getting passed in. Our connection infos, we already have that information. You'll notice there are a couple of buttons here. And if you see at the bottom, it's telling us that there's an edit button. It's telling us that there's a delete button for these connection infos. Really what this is doing is pulling connection infos from our main connection info tab. And it's just representing them because they're being used in the context of the GitHub integration here. So notice there's still like ARM template source control in here, things like that. I'm going to get rid of some of those. Create blueprints, like create new ARM template blueprint. We don't want to create blueprints in this integration. We want to show a table of existing blueprints. And in that table, we want the user to be able to say, this blueprint is ready to export to source control. Maybe then we give them a warning like, hey, something already exists in Git that matches this name. It's going to overwrite. Are you okay with overwrite? I mean, you can check first. You don't know. I'm just worried about the formatting of the table first and representing that data back to the user. So blueprints, ARM template library. Let's go ahead and get this swapped out. Again, this is just because I'm taking from other things I've already worked with. So we don't want it to be ARM template library. Again, this is our blueprints tab. So this is going to be CloudBolt blueprints for now. I'm going to get rid of my button for create ARM blueprint because we don't need to create a blueprint. And we're not concerned with ARM blueprints. So notice we didn't see a list of them there. And I did change the name of these. So we also want to go back and just verify instead of ARM blueprints in our context, it's just blueprints. So that's all we're going to reference. So let's go back over to the blueprints tab. We don't want to say if ARM blueprints, we want to say if blueprints. And why don't I just look for ARM in here? that tells me everything I need to switch up here. So list of ARM template blueprints. So maybe we say list of CloudBolt blueprints. It doesn't really have ARM template listed in the blueprint. We don't really care about any of that. It's different. Any more ARM? Oh, there's all kinds of ARM in here. So the body. So notice this is our table. We've created a table, blueprint name, active resources. I don't really care about that. That's something that doesn't apply here. Connection info doesn't really apply here either, because there's going to be one kind of master connection info for this integration. This is, yeah, connection info type doesn't matter. Actually, I'm going to leave a couple of these, but blueprint name, let's say maybe resource type, something we care about. Let's just take a look and see what other columns we might care about from a blueprint perspective. Just since this centers around export and import, just want to make sure we're capturing the data that the user might need to see as they're going through the export process. So actually, let's look at the overview tab. Okay, resource. I think resource type and blueprint name is really all that we're probably going to need to display. Okay. And then there will be an additional column with a couple of actions inside of that column. So we'll get there. So let's do blueprint name, resource type. I'm going to do actions. Okay, so now that we have our actions, let's go ahead and look at our body here. So it's not ARM, it's no longer ARM, it's going to be just for each BP in blueprints. Notice this is a for loop. So this is Django template language. There's a lot of good resources for Django out there. So really helpful for building web pages dynamically. So notice for every blueprint, we want to create a new table row here, and we want to close the table row way down here below. I'm probably going to get rid of a good majority of this. So each table row then has, these are going to be table headers and then table data. Not even sure what the TV means. Not super great at HTML. So anyway, I'm gonna validate this as I go through it. So cv-sp, open up shell plus real quick. I'm actually going to capture a blueprint to use as I validate this. So use the same Jenkins blueprint. Notice in the URL, it is ID number 37. So I'm going to go and I'm going to get my BP equals service. I'm going to tab that out. Service blueprint. Objects. .get. Get's really helpful if I need to get a single item. I can also do a filter on multiple items, but that ID is 37. Okay, we have our Jenkins blueprint. So let's do BP dot, I suspect it's name. There you go. There's my Jenkins name. And I can also do BP dot and tab to see everything that's on here. So the next thing I'm going to do is BP probably dot resource type. And then resource type dot name, I would assume. There you go. There we go. That's all we need. I could even take, actually, you know what? I think I want label because label is going to be the human readable. There you go. So those are going to be the two columns that I'm going to put in now. Get all the way down to my end of the table row. I don't care about any of this stuff. Just a bunch of conditional formatting. I'm going to want 3 pieces of information here. And the first one's going to be, if I'm referencing my BP directly, I can do double curly bracket, and then I can paste this in there. So BP.name. Next one's going to be double curly bracket, and then BP.resourceType.name. The third one, until I have those buttons ready to go, I'm going to leave that blank. But now I should have enough to showcase the blueprint name and the resource type, and then any actions. The one thing that I might not like about this with 337 blueprints is this is going to be a lot of blueprints. The other thing that I'm recognizing now that I'm talking through this is I did not filter out any non-active blueprints. So let's be sure that I'm doing that as well. So I picked bp.status. And again, you can use the data model browser that I showed earlier to get this information as well, or you can tab through it. But we're looking for things that are of an active status. So let's go through and go back to our filter under utilities where we're doing get all blueprints. So I'm going to do a dot exclude, and I'm also going to do a dot filter. So I can do additional, I can do filters on top of filters. Yes. Actually, let's do this. Since this is going to be a multiple lines to keep it within the 80 line standard, I'm going to VPs equals filter, and we want status equal active. So that makes sense, right? Let's do VPs equal status equals active. Okay, so we have our VPs here. And then we're going to do VPs. I didn't test that until less than I meant to. And then we're going to exclude from those blueprints the ones that were named custom servers. We're going to pull those out. So that should do the trick, but let's double check our length of VPs. This should be way less than 337 at this point. 144, way better, way more workable, but still going to be a lot in that table. So I need to figure out how to paginate that, but that's probably not something I'm going to do. Part of this exercise is just to get a running table and get an initial example up and running. Something I can iterate on later. So this should do the trick now. So we know that VP's active, and then again, let's think of one more. This should take it down to 143. There we go. So that's going to give us all blueprints that are active and are not named custom server. So just we can filter one, and then we can continue to iterate on that set as we go through this. And that's because it's when we do these searches, we look at VPs, it's a query set. So these query sets can be further filtered and excluded in all of those Django type operations against multiple times. So get all blueprints. Let's go over to, again, this is going to be a lot of rows, 144, but it's going to be something. So let's go ahead and restart Apache one more time, and then just check out, see how things are looking inside of CloudBolt. Report to load because Apache's coming back up. There we go. Okay, back over to Git management. Notice the XUI is now no longer there. There we go. Now we have a list of blueprints, and maybe the other thing that we can do here is a hyperlink for these names. So I'll do that real quick. I like to do that. That's helpful because if I need to go directly to the blueprint to check it out, make sure it's the right blueprint or whatever. The other thing I'm noticing is this is not sorted at all. So we want to make sure that these results are sorted. You know what I'm going to do though is I don't really need to send all of this data. I think we would be, I want to sort this data by name because I'm a big fan of doing that. Resource type is actually, I grabbed the wrong thing. So I need to sort the data, add the hyperlink, make sure the resource type is the label. So let's go back and do that. And this is just iterative testing as we go through these things. So that's going to fix the blueprint label. The next thing to do is I need to figure out how to sort that array of objects. So if I go back over to my utilities, that is get all blueprints, get from, and I can hit the up arrow. That just brings me back to all of those, and then I can do VPs equals get all blueprints, then BPs. Let's see, I don't think I can do a dot sort. I can do, let's try it. Let's see, and here's where, cheat a little bit again, Django, sort, query. Order by. That's handy. Look at that. So we can do a dot order by and then order it by what the values portion is for, but let's give that a shot and see what that looks like. Let's go over to this. So let's just take a look at it. It starts with OF dash. So that should definitely not be our first blueprint. So let's see if we can go to BPs dot order. That would be over. Order by. Okay. Actually, label. I think would be more appropriate. Let's see. Well, you know what? I think name is accurate. Name is not defined. Okay. Here we go. Nope, gotta be a string. Perfect. Puts the numbers first, the other ones later, go into your A's and the next one. So this is really pretty handy. So let's do, we can actually just do in our return, we can do return the blueprints and order them by name. So that's going to sort our blueprints so that, again, when we get back over, and I don't remember what else I said I was going to do, but let's take a look. We fixed the resource type, so that should show labels now. We fixed our blueprint name. The third thing was adding in a hyperlink here. So I'm already doing that in other tabs. Let's open the blueprints tab here. So we can see here. So this is interesting. So the other thing we could do is add an icon next to the blueprints that specify the resource type. Might look a little fancy. I'm not going to do that right now, but that's something that we've done in the past. It's part of the possible here. But I do care about this blueprint detail. And this blueprint detail is a URL that is in the CloudBolt system. So notice I'm doing an ahref. This is just a hyperlink that gets me over to to my blueprint itself. So I'm just gonna copy that real quick, go back to my tab blueprints. I can do, instead of just bp.name, knock that down a line. Let's do but, should just be bp.id because we have that blueprint object. And then we're going to show the user the bp.name. And that should be all we're looking for here. Okay, so that should give us our hyperlink. Let's go ahead and save that. Now I have made a couple of changes in the views file. Normally for an HTML file update, we wouldn't need to do anything, but I need to restart Apache because we changed things in views. Why is this still showing ARM templates library? I'm not editing the wrong thing again. Find out in a minute, right? Management tab blueprints. Let's close out the ARM template stuff. I'm pretty sure I've been editing the right things, but we'll find out here soon. Let's close ARM templates until we need to get back to it again. Let's actually forget management. I'm going to do a find in files. I'm going to look for ARM because it's out there somewhere. Okay, there it is. It's on our admin page.html. So I thought I'd cleaned that up yet already, but I did not. So let's go back. This is going to be, and this, by the time we get to the page, it'll be reflected appropriately. Get management. Management. We already have a description for this elsewhere. I think it's in utilities for a doc string. Here. I keep calling it get management. We'll see what it looks like after we're done here. Use that there. No, admin home, admin. I'm not sure if that's. Let's just do one more search. Still quite a bit. Oh, so those three are okay. I'm okay with it. Arm, create, edit, delete. We'll get there. But templated back blueprints. Okay, so there's some blueprint language. It's arm, no arm back to the blueprints are currently deployed in the environment. Eligible. We'll get eligible blueprints are currently deployed in the environment. So there's another way to update our. I'm just continuing to search for ARM, make sure that everything makes sense. Here's another one. This is on my source control tab. ARM CI create. I don't really care about ARM CI create. So I'm going to leave this because we'll get back there. But CI create, come back over to our URLs file. I did notice that I don't really care about ARM CI create. Actually, I'm going to call this get CI create because it is going to be a little different than other CI creations, but so update that in the URLs file. I'm not going to use it quite yet, but we're just preparing for future capabilities. Okay. List of connection info is used for Git management. GitHub code and labels field. Okay. Let's just continue to search, make sure that we are clear of ARM. Okay, last two, it's in my tab source control. So notice this ARM CI edit. Instead of ARM, we want to do get CI edit. Here we want to do get CI edit. And then the first one that we already changed to CI create, we want to do get CI create. So that should be all the changes for ARM. I don't see any more references in here. Part of the challenge is that taking other code is finding fragments of it littered throughout. Anyway, I think we just changed templates there, so I'm just going to go ahead and reload here. So now we should see, oh, I broke something. Let's go ahead and restart, just to be sure. What I'm willing to bet is these URLs don't exist. So what we're going to do, it's probably going to fail on me again. I would put money on it. So I'm just going to, while I'm waiting for that to fail in the tail of the application log, and there we go. No reverse match, get CI create not found. So it doesn't see those URLs yet. So I'm actually going to open those up. And I'm going to create kind of generic methods for these under my views file. So get management, import views. Okay, so go back over to my views and create connection info. So first one I need to And then again, just GitHub kind of sees what I'm trying to do here. I just want filler functions in here for now. Let's create connection info. That doesn't really make much sense to me. I'm a bigger fan of doing this, so I'm gonna fix that now while I'm at it. Okay, so now that I've fixed those, because we can see that it was looking for that get CI create method, we're gonna go ahead and restart Apache again. If I saved all, I'll find out soon enough. Let's come back over, refresh, and then we're about to pause here for the first recording. But I think we've made a lot of progress in an hour and a half. All right, there we go. So now we have our hyperlink, and our hyperlink should take us over to the blueprint itself. Still waking up from that deployment, but we see our resource types. Some of these don't have a resource type, and that's okay. Maybe what we do is say, if not resource type, just put in none. And that's all right too, right? It's probably the appropriate thing to do. We'll probably approach that on the next recording. But for now, we've got at least our initial admin. So we have none of the actions to connect to Git or anything yet have been put in here, but at the end of the day, they'll be, just an action that we reuse across all of these blueprints to sync them up to a GitHub repository. So we'll continue to work through this in oncoming videos. Thanks.